Greetings everyone, my name is Dr. Jason Freeman. I'd like to welcome you all to my channel. In this video I have a fun, thought-provoking conversation with award-winning author Cerece Rennie Murphy. We talk about everything from Star Wars to her writing process to her favorite memories co-creating a book with her young son. So, without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so question number one. So looking over your bibliography, yeah, there's definitely a sci-fi fantasy kind of focus. I think it's like collectively called speculative fiction. So
Hmm.
what was the thing that drew you to that genre as a writer?
Oh man. Okay. Well, first, I have been a sci-fi fan and reader since I was a kid. I was that child that asked for a book instead of a toy in the toy store. So my mom took me to see Empire Strikes Back at the Uptown Theater in DC. And I fell in love. That's where I first fell in love with sci-fi. I love the world. I love the possibilities. I love the new sort of expanded discussion on spirituality, which people don't really usually think of speculative fiction as a spiritual genre, but I think it is deeply spiritual. And that's one of the reasons that one of the things that drew me to it, because it's all about the meat of life, what
Yeah,
it means to be human, what it means to be in community with other people. What is your responsibility? Now, just because they put dragons and lightsabers and stuff like that, that's all like cool and entertainment. But really, what draws me to speculative fiction is this idea of it really grappling with the root issues of what it means to be human and human with other people.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah. I was thinking
yeah, so
like modern mythology, essentially.
absolutely, absolutely. So that's kind of what drew me to it. Um, And then, like I said, I've been a reader. It was not my goal to be a writer. I've been a reader all my life, but is it 2011, 2010, I was washing the dishes and I got the idea for my first science fiction story, like my own idea. And I liked the idea so much, I wanted to see how it would end. And I knew I wouldn't know unless I wrote it. And so that's how I started. I didn't even have an idea to publish at that time. I just wanted to see if I could write the story that was in my head. And yeah, that was my first book, Order of the Seers, and
Mhm.
I have never stopped.
Awesome, awesome. Actually, I have a Star Wars question.
Yes.
So, thinking about Star Wars from Phantom Menace all the way to the Acolyte, and we can
Hmm.
include books too because I do have one Star Wars book here if I can get to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I've had this since like high school. So I was in
Oh
a
my gosh.
science
Yeah.
fiction book club. So of
Hmm.
all the like Star Wars media, what's your favorite?
So I'm one of those purists. So if it's not the movie, it's
Okay,
not canon. So
gotcha.
I'm a movie person.
Hmm.
And I've seen the different books and I'm like, oh, but do I really like how true is this gonna be to the canon? And I know that that's not true. I mean, and that's really an old idea because
Hmm.
now it's a whole thing
Yes.
that, yeah. So yeah, and it's the movies for me. It's the movies for me. And it's funny, my daughter and I are on episode 6 of The Acolyte.
Okay. So I
We
won't say
just
anything.
started it last night. Oh, I'm not going to give you any spoilers, except to say it's actually really good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me it's Rogue One. So to me it's like space battles.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
monk that's like walking through. I don't know, I'm just spoiling. But like the monk and like the Force protecting him, and then
Yes. Yes.
The Darth Vader thing at the end, like that to me, I love that.
Absolutely. Oh, I thought you were just talking about like books versus the
No,
movies.
sorry, yeah, I was, yeah,
TV series. But no, Rogue One is one of the best Star Wars
hmm,
movies, period.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. I was saying to the kids because they're they've been hating on it for a long time, just like
hmm,
on GP because they
yeah,
knew how deeply committed I. So they were like, "Well, we're not gonna like it at all," and they are starting to get into it, which is like the
no,
indoctrination has been working. They're excited. And so we've been actually going through, like we started with episode 1,
hmm,
which 1, 2, and 3, I think like a lot of Star Wars fans are my least favorite.
Mhm.
Although by three, I'm like, all right, we're getting interesting. We
Yeah,
we
I'm the
got some
same.
battles,
I
we
can
got
do
some.
with 3, but the first 2, no.
Woo, it's tough. It's tough. And those I haven't seen one since I saw it in the theater.
Gotcha.
They saw it with their dad, and I was like, okay, I should probably see it again. And then I saw it too, and I was like, okay, this isn't as bad as I remember, but
Mhm.
it's still, but anyway, but yeah, they're starting to get into it, and it's just so much fun. So I was telling him, he was like, okay, what are the best? And I was like, Empire Strikes Back and then Rogue One
Mhm.
are the two, and yeah, are the two best Star Wars movies in my opinion.
Awesome, awesome. So I think you've already answered my second question, which was why you became a writer.
Yeah.
So I guess who were your favorite authors growing up?
Oh man. Okay. So this is kind of weird because I read a lot of literary fiction growing up.
Hmm.
So, it was such a privilege because my parents kept a couple bookshelves in our house, and my dad collected Black authors. So when people are like, "Oh, I never knew there were Black authors," or "Wow, that was so different when I found out." Literally, the easiest thing for me to get my hands on as a kid was a book by a Black author. All I had to do is go downstairs.
Awesome.
And I don't even think my dad even read most of the books that were there, but he was just like Black author, like we just putting it up. So I got introduced to Toni Morrison pretty early, and Toni Morrison is my favorite writer.
Okay.
Of her books, Beloved is my favorite. Um, but there are many, Toni Morrison,
Yeah.
she's just the pinnacle of writing for me. And so I read a lot of Toni Morrison, poetry Maya Angelou. I read Alice Walker,
Hmm.
um, a little bit of James Baldwin, but it was I think as a child it was really intense
Hmm.
for me.
It
So
was
I was like, I
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
I'll just stick with fiction because it's like too much. Of course, now I recognize the true
Hmm.
deep brilliance of him, but
Yes.
also it helps to see his interviews
Hmm.
because it really humanizes him and puts all of his writing in the context of
Yeah.
his humanity. And it's such a
Absolutely.
gift to see that now. But anyway, back in the day, it was just like, okay, woo, all right, this is a lot. Um, but Toni Morrison is my favorite writer, and I've read a lot of literary fiction, which has a lot of literary fiction, Black female authors that have a lot of magical realism in them.
Hmm.
And the funny thing about it is, I was on this panel a long time ago when they were talking about, magical realism is like, how do you decide to put that in? And I was like, I feel like that's the way Black people live.
Hmm.
What the idea that the ancestors are with you and it's
Hmm.
spirit over there, like that is all like a part of our daily life.
The
So I
culture,
didn't know
absolutely.
that was actually a genre or whatever. I was like, yeah, this is like how it is. I mean, that shadow comes alive sometimes, or you have this sense of spirituality that you're bringing with you, or that's just even if you don't believe it, it's a part of your family and
Hmm.
culture, even if you don't so it was that's those are my favorite writers growing up, and they still are. In terms of speculative fiction, I didn't discover Octavia Butler
Okay.
until my early 20s.
Hmm.
Actually, my friend Kehinde gave me Wild Seed,
Okay. Okay.
and it's the first book that I read it, and then I ended it, couldn't believe it, and then started back on page one because I was just like, wait, what? And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, so I got to read this whole thing again. Um, so Octavia Butler's Wild Seed is one of
Hmm.
my favorite books ever.
Okay.
And then Frank Herbert's Dune. Now, I
Yes.
came to Dune through the movie. My
Hmm.
mom used to take us to see sci-fi movies as a kid because I think she thought it was like going to be kid friendly. So like I saw Blade Runner in the theater, and my
Okay.
mom was just like, "What is happening right now?" And I'm like, "No, mom, I've got this. I'll totally see you." But so I saw the movie first, like yes, with Sting, like the
Hmm.
ABBA soundtrack, like all of
Yeah.
that, and I loved it. Those two books, Wild Seed and Dune, are like transformative.
Hmm.
So then I found out Dune was a book, and then went down that rabbit hole. But in terms of speculative fiction, books. yeah, Frank Herbert's Dune and Octavia Butler's Wild Seed are like my bookends.
Awesome, awesome. Have you met any authors that you kind of read as either a young person or as like a young adult, like at these different cons that you've been going to?
Oh man, I haven't. I mean,
Okay.
Octavia Butler
Okay.
unfortunately died
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
before I was even in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, there are people, yeah, I haven't really met anybody. And usually if I'm at a convention, honestly, I'm at my booth and
Gotcha.
I'm selling my books. I don't really get out much, but yeah, yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay. Okay. What have been the biggest obstacles that you face becoming an author?
The biggest obstacle for me, and I suspect any creative person,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a trait of humanity. The biggest obstacle is getting over my own self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always say, any people can try to stop you or naysay or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you are the only person who can stop you before you even begin.
Yeah.
And that's the most dangerous. That's the most powerful because
Mm-hmm.
before you even tried, you can stop yourself. And so I would say the most difficult part of being an author has been getting over my own self-doubt
Mm-hmm.
and limitations. And after that, it's just not accepting no.
Okay. Okay.
But you can't, the external pressure, if you can master your own instinct to let fear dominate what you do,
Mm-hmm.
like everybody else becomes secondary because
Okay.
that's the most powerful thing you're fighting. And after that, it's 2024. When I first published my first book in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
I was told that there was no audience for my book. I went out, and did the traditional publishing thing and tried to,
Mm-hmm.
queries and all that good stuff. And I would get, your form letters with rejection, but then I'd also get we think this is really well written, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't think it'll be commercially successful.
Okay.
Now there are 8 different languages throughout the
Mm-hmm.
series. There are people of color throughout. Um, there are Black people as main characters,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was told, so that was what I got from the traditional side. And then I got, there's no audience for your book because Black people don't read science fiction. White people don't read Black authors, and no one reads science fiction from a woman. This is 2012.
Yeah.
Um, it's wonderful to see the changes, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still amazing to see how many people actually still believe some version of that.
Yeah.
Um, And I mean, when you think about that, as a Black woman who reads sci-fi, like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, that's wrong. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? White people don't read Black authors, like that's actually not true. Like
Mm-hmm.
Toni Morrison, like all my
Yeah.
favorite authors, had a wide readership, and nobody reads Black sci-fi from a woman. I was like, yeah, again wrong. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, I just went out into the world. I went to my first sci-fi convention, that was New York Comic Con,
Mm-hmm.
and sold over 100 copies to every type of person there was. And that's when I knew that they don't actually know anything.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what you can do. Only you know that. And if you let yourself, you will find out.
Mhm.
And everybody else will read along with you. So it's really about mastering your instinct to pull yourself back when you should be moving forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it kind of makes me think about the whole thing about like black movies don't sell overseas, and then you have like a movie like Black Panther, like one of the most successful movies. It's like I think that's nonsense.
Well, the reality is it just doesn't bear out,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Black culture literally is
Yes.
I want to be very specific about that
Hmm.
actually, because Black culture, true, but it's African American culture
Hmm.
specifically.
Yeah.
When you think there are only what, 30 million of us?
Hmm.
It, and we dominate like our influence in everything,
Absolutely.
not just culture,
Hmm.
not just music, everything. It's felt throughout the entire world. And there are
Absolutely.
only 30 million of us on the entire planet.
Yeah.
So the idea that no one is interested in our culture, interested in our stories, is just, it does not bear out in reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you can listen to that if you want to. But then yeah, then Black Panther, then all these movies and
Hmm.
stories and books that that transcend. And that is our legacy.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll move on to another question, but I think about like, so I've gone to England the last 2 years to teach a study abroad course, and I look
Mhm.
at the impact of African American culture on
Yes,
music, on
yes,
dress, on everything there.
everything. It is
Yeah.
a defining
Yes.
influence. It is a defining influence.
Mm.
What is cool is by and large Black culture. Like
Yes.
that's a fact.
Yeah.
I mean, when yeah, you got Mercedes trying to it's just crazy. I
Yeah.
remember watching it with the Chrysler or Mercedes stuff, like using like a I can't even remember what it was a hip hop song. I
Hmm.
was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't, yeah,
Yeah.
no.
All right, so you mentioned kind of why you started to become a writer, and so with that first book, the book one of Order of the Seers, what was
Mhm.
the process of getting that book published? So what was that like? And kind of give as much detail as you like, but like, what was that process of going from writing the book and then just getting it published, getting it out there?
So, after writing the book,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan fiction fan. Hey, out
Mm-hmm.
there for all those fan fiction
Yeah.
people. Um, when I first wrote the story, like I said, I had no intention of publishing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just really wanted to share it. And I did that on a fan fiction platform for the first book.
Okay.
And as I got the feedback, people were like, no, this is like a really, really, really good story. You should probably do something with this. And so like I said, I did the query, the traditional publishing
Okay.
process, the writing letters, and I'd heard that J.K. Rowling got 100 rejections. And so I was like, okay, Cerise, like get ready. If your goal is to get at least 101. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as I was going through the process, like I said, I kept getting that this will not be commercially successful. And I knew what that was code for.
Mm-hmm.
I also wasn't willing to change the main characters. I wasn't willing to do some of the things that they might have wanted to make it commercially successful.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to think, and this was not a particularly long process, but I am an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
sort of in my bones,
Yeah.
and I'm not good at asking people for permission to do things. I like control.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just decided, why am I waiting for someone to give me permission to tell the story I want to tell in the way I want to tell it?
Yeah.
And I decided that didn't make sense, which is why I decided to publish it myself.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I've been doing that for over a decade now. And
Awesome.
both of
Awesome.
them is independently published. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for not compromising those characters. So I was thinking about the book I recently read, Between Two
Mhm.
Seas, and I love this book. So I really like how you did not compromise on those characters. And
Well, Toni Morrison talked about that in various ways. And ironically, Prince is a real inspiration for me.
hmm.
He
Hmm.
had such a singular vision for
Yes.
his artistic journey. And
Hmm.
that's really what it is. Everybody, you don't have to like every Prince album. He's
Hmm.
not making the album for you.
Nope.
He's making the best art that he can and
Yeah.
then sharing it with you. And you're
Hmm.
either down with that or you're not. And so, growing up watching him and his artistic journey really
Hmm.
gave me the inspiration to follow my own vision of the
Yeah.
stories I wanted to tell. Because my stories, I don't come up with my stories, I dream them.
Okay. Okay.
Every story in Between Two Seasons,
Hmm.
yeah, has come to me in either a vision, like I said, I was washing the dishes, or like it
Hmm.
just comes to me. And
Yeah.
so I feel very passionate that that is how they need to then go forward, is how they were given to me.
Hmm.
And so I can't really betray that
Hmm.
trust. And so yeah. So I started, yeah, independently publishing my work. And sci-fi conventions have been a big part of growing my audience and
Yeah.
meeting new readers and that kind of thing. And like I said, I published um Order the Seers in September of 2012.
Yeah.
And then I went to New York Comic Con, which at that time was over 100,000 people. I think at its height, it was like 180,000. But
Hmm.
I didn't know that. I knew of two conventions.
Yeah.
I knew of San Diego And I was like, what's my first book? I'm not gonna fly. I'm based in the East Coast. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
fly to San
Hmm.
Diego. I was like, oh, but New York, I could drive there, which
Yeah.
was literally the depth of thinking. So I called, I got a booth in the small press section
Mhm.
with everybody telling me there's no way you're gonna make your booth feedback. It's expensive. It is. And they were like, nobody knows you. You only have one book. Blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
I told you about they.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what they think. So I was like, well, whatever. I'm just gonna drive up. So me and my mom drove up.
Hmm.
I left my kids with my husband at the time. And like I said, I sold over 100 books to every type of person. And that is how I knew that my audience was as big as I dared
Yeah.
to find it. And that was the process for me. And I've been going ever since.
Awesome. Awesome.
Everybody that bought my book was, according to they, not
Hmm.
someone who should have bought my book.
Yeah. No, awesome.
Um, yeah, and at that time at New York Comic Con, I was the only woman, period, not Black woman, the only woman selling a book that she had written in the small press section.
Okay. Okay.
It was crazy.
So actually, that makes me think of another question. So how has like so 2012 to 2024, what have been some of the changes you've seen in regards to kind of these Comic Cons in regards to who's coming,
Yeah.
authors? Like, what's like some of the biggest changes you've seen over that decade plus?
I am so excited that at New York Comic Con, I am no longer the only woman or the only
Yeah.
Black woman in the small press section
Yeah.
selling a book that she has written. So that's been really exciting to see.
Hmm.
Another big change is that major publishers are starting to bring their Black speculative fiction authors to these events.
Okay.
When I started at New York Comic Con, N.K. Jemisin was not coming to New York Comic
Hmm.
Con. And that's another reason why I knew, okay, I'm definitely glad that I'm in my lane and doing this myself.
Hmm.
N.K. Jemisin lives in New York. Daniel Jose Older lives in New York. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, literally, this is a train ride. Like, why aren't these Black speculative fiction, like, this is their jam? But
Hmm.
the traditional publishers literally didn't believe that. They didn't even bring their authors that were from New York to New York Comic Con. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, you can't publish my book.
Yeah.
Because if this is how you see all these brilliant minds, I could just
Mhm.
imagine there's no place for me.
Yeah.
Now that is very different. You know, you
Awesome.
have all kinds of wonderful Black speculative fiction authors coming and being featured at these events. And that is just wonderful to see. The audience really has only expanded. There were
Hmm.
always Black and brown people at these events.
Yeah.
There were always, and like what I mean that literally, Black
Hmm.
and brown, like every group of people, all walks of life at these events. So now they're getting representation from the industry, but they've
Yeah.
always been there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a
Absolutely.
big thing that's changed.
Awesome. Awesome. I
Mhm.
hope you're enjoying the video, but before we go any further, I just want to quickly shout out my Patreon page, Dr. Jason Freeman Reacts. On the page, I have full, unedited reactions from movies such as the classic 1995 film Dead Presidents and the 2020 film A Quiet Place Part 2. I also have reactions for entire seasons of shows, including season 2 of House of the Dragon and the first season of Doctor Who on Disney Plus, starring Scuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. And for those of you who purchase my highest tier, you'll be receiving a few tokens of my appreciation, including a mug, a tote bag, and some clothing with a Diaspora Dispatch logo designed by yours truly. To get access to all this, just go to my Patreon page and sign up for one of the tiers. You can find a link for it in the description of this video, or just type patreon.com/DRJASONFREEMAN. Thank you for listening. Now back to the video. But yeah, I did want to talk about this book again a little bit. So actually, I read it. I've read it twice. So I read it when I first got it, and then me and my family went to Crescent Butte for my brother-in-law's wedding, and
Mhm.
so I read it on the plane. I was like, I have to interview Cerece. 'Cause
Oh, thank you.
yeah, because I'm like, because I read it again. It's like this is really, really good. So I had some questions. So there's 4 chapters. So I wanted to have a question for each chapter.
Yeah.
And so let me just start with the first one. So the that first one is titled a
Feast of
feast
the people, yeah.
feast of the Fifolet. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration for that story? And are those fairies? Like I wasn't totally sure. Okay.
Hmm. They are fairies, but they're
Okay.
different from sort of traditional fairy. So there are
Hmm.
two inspirations. Um, I was looking at a tree, like a picture of this beautiful big old tree
Mhm.
in the South. And I just asked a question. I was like, I wonder how many of my ancestors were swinging from that tree.
Yeah.
It's an awful thought. It's not
Horror.
one
Yeah.
that you want to have,
Mhm.
but if you're aware of, like, you can't help but wonder that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, or at least I can't help but wonder that when I go to certain places. And as soon as I asked the question, the story came to me
Okay.
of
Okay.
this fairy who was managing the forest
Yeah.
and finding a threat
Mhm.
in the practice of lynching to her forest.
Yeah.
Because you think, what happens? I mean, they brutalize these bodies, burn them.
Yeah.
What happens to all of what is experienced in that horror?
Yeah.
Like where does the blood go? Where do the entrails go? Like where,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
just assume it's sort of swept away, but actually nature is dealing with that.
Yeah.
And like, what is that process? That
Yeah.
imagine de-absorb. I thought of the ground absorbing
Mhm.
that sorrow, all those tears,
Yeah.
all that fear and doubt
Yeah.
and tragedy,
Mhm.
which is not what nature is meant to do. We're meant to clean up our own messes,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so in Malay, the fairy in Feast of the Fifilier, it just came this story
Okay.
of what she was doing,
Yeah.
because everything we do has consequences, whether we
Yeah.
recognize it or not, whether we see it or not, energetically. That's a scientific fact
Mhm.
that energy is neither created or
Yep.
destroyed.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Conservation of energy.
And
Yeah.
and so I just I I yeah, that story just came to me. The other thing, the name Feast of the Fifilier, I was reading my dear friend Lynn Emery's LaShawn Roussel mystery series.
Mhm.
Lynn Emery is from Louisiana,
Okay.
and her stories, it's like a paranormal mystery, and she takes the lore from Louisiana
Mhm.
and brings it out in these stories. It's fantastic, fantastic work.
Awesome.
And she had this, she was referencing these Fifilier that was sort of these fairies in Louisiana. And
Mhm.
there's everything from like they're mermaids that take them to a different
Mhm.
world, and they, these different things. And as I was reading her book, because I was looking for the name for this fairy, and
Mhm.
I was reading her book and I saw Fifilier, and I was like, and the Feast of Fifilier came to me. So I called Lynn. I was like, I'm stealing it. I'm stealing your myth. And she was like, okay. But Lynn's known me for a long time, so she
Mhm.
knows to get crazy grocery. But yeah, so that's the inspiration and how that story came about.
Awesome. And I love you drawing like that mythology that was already existing within the Black
Absolutely.
community.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
because
loved it too.
I did a video about like, so there's a whole thing about race swapping and all that stuff. And while I don't really have an issue with it, it's like we have a lot of stories within Black culture that we can draw on ourselves, so we don't have to like adapt some story like a
That's right.
Shakespearean story. Like we have our own stories that we can have our own kind of mythology and have that out there.
We already do. The
Yeah.
reason I think it's just that, do you think, because there are a million Superman-like
Yeah.
stories in the Black community. The
Yes.
question is, will any of them get made
Yeah.
into
Absolutely.
something that you would want to see, which is what made Black Panther just so profound.
Hmm.
Because it's not like there aren't a million other Black Panther like stories that have
Yeah.
been told, like
Hmm.
for decades. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? But the thing is, you didn't think any of them would get made to the level that you want to see in the fandom.
Yes.
So rather that there's this feeling that you can't just bring your own, you have to try to fit in where you get in.
Hmm.
And if people are mad about it, what I would say is produce the million other stories
Hmm.
well, so that
Yeah.
they can expand the fandom.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the solution to that. Yeah.
So the second story in the book, First Blood, deals with a very serious topic. So it deals with sexual assault, and the
Yes.
framing is during slavery. And so
Hmm.
my question is this: th- I'm sure there's different ways to deal with it, but I see these two big ways. One is to kind of walk the line very gingerly, so you're not triggering the people
Mhm.
who've experienced it. But then there's also what I would see as the Schindler's List kind of approach, where you just put it out there. So you're going to show the
Yeah,
horrors just so
yeah.
people can kind of get to feel this is what happened. So
Mhm.
what way, when you do these different stories, what's your kind of approach to kind of presenting these different, very sensitive type of topics?
Yeah. Thank you for this question.
Hmm.
So I dreamt this story for First Blood a decade ago.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be a full length book.
Okay.
I am not someone, this is probably the only slave narrative you're ever going to get from me. I remember waking up and I was like, Lord, I don't know why you gave me this story. I don't want to write this book. I don't
Yeah.
even want to do research for it. Like, because it takes a year for me to generally write a book.
Hmm.
It doesn't, sadly, it doesn't even matter the length of the book. That's just a
The
process.
process.
Um, and I was like, I don't want to be in this space for a whole year. I'm going to be a
Yeah.
very angry, very sad, very
Hmm.
depressed woman.
Yeah.
And because I take it in, that's why I'm so very cautious about what I let into my headspace,
Hmm.
because I will not forget things that I see. I will just hold it in.
Like, it becomes part of you.
It becomes a part of me. And so I didn't want to write it. And I was like, oh, but I have this sacred mission,
Hmm.
to bring these stories to life that are
Yeah.
given to me. So I was like, okay, God, this is going to be literally the last book. I know what I promised. I
Yes.
said I'd write every story you gave me.
Yeah.
This is going to be like literally the last book I write in my life. Like I'm going to be on my deathbed writing the last,
Yeah.
because I don't want to write this book.
Yeah.
So that's because of the subject matter, how I saw it first, how it came to me is Clara's story.
Hmm.
She was in the kitchen and then gets asked to come up to the master's chamber and
Yeah.
then is raped. And I saw it and I didn't want to write
Yeah.
it. So I just held it
Okay.
and I wrote down the outline of the story. In 2020, which was a really terrible year and
Yeah.
everybody, for a lot of different reasons,
Yeah.
um, I had just finished the Wolf Queen series, and I always write a short story. It's like a palate cleanser, I don't know, or
Okay.
something. Like it's
Hmm.
just how my brain like reorganizes until we
Yeah.
get to the next thing.
Hmm.
But I had more than one short story. I had Feast of
Yeah.
the Fifilier. I
Yeah.
had all the other three stories.
Hmm.
And then I started, and then the story for First Blood came to me again. And I thought, could I make this a short story? Like, do I not have to write like a whole 350-page book on this? And I was like, maybe, how could I center it in what I see? Because I don't believe we are not the descendants of the downtrodden
Hmm.
and enslaved. We are the descendants of the triumphant.
The
We are
survivors.
the
Yeah.
descendant of the people who made the impossible happen.
Yes.
That's a fact. I shouldn't be here. When you
Hmm.
think about I mean, from the Middle Passage on, I
Yes.
shouldn't even be here. The
Hmm.
level of hope that was required
Yeah.
is just something that I don't think humanity has ever seen. And hopefully humanity doesn't have to see again
Yeah.
because of the level of tragedy and horror that
Hmm.
required that level of hope.
Yes.
So I knew I wanted to tell, if I'm going to tell a slave narrative, and plenty of people have done it, they've done it well, they've done it better than I even want to do it. I thought, how can I tell this from a lens of power, which is
Hmm.
how I see our
Yeah.
ancestors, people of
Yes.
immense power.
Hmm.
And then I thought about starting it with Mame
Hmm.
and then Clara sort of entering at a different space in Clara's life,
Yeah.
and then Noemi as really who we are.
Hmm.
Noemi is the beneficiary of all her ancestors' faith and struggle.
Yeah.
She gets to carry that on.
Hmm.
And I thought, that's a story I can tell.
Yes.
And so I didn't need to focus on the rape
Hmm.
because Noemi is here.
Yeah.
And when you know what happens, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Everybody
Hmm.
knows because everybody knows this story. So I
Hmm.
don't have to then re-traumatize all of us to
Yes.
tell it. And I actually couldn't, I can't, I will never write a rape scene.
Okay. Okay.
I can't do it
Yeah.
because what it would require for me to write a rape scene,
Hmm. Yeah. No.
yeah.
Yeah.
So other people can do other things, But I wanted, particularly with these stories, which I think are my most kind of, To Find You has historical references, but these are very specific
Hmm.
African American history stories,
Yeah.
except for Blue Honey. Um, and I wanted to tell it from the way I tell all my stories, which is a place of power.
Yeah.
And so that's how I approached it, if
Yeah.
that answers your question.
No,
That was a long way around.
no,
But
no, great answer. Great answer. Yeah, with my teaching, because I teach a class called Blacks in America, and one of the things I focus in on is resistance to slavery. Because so
yeah,
often, like for a long time, it was like the passive acceptance, and it's like that was not the case.
it
There's
was
been,
not.
yeah,
There
multiple
was, yeah,
cases, resistance,
yes,
rebellions from the beginning.
yes. We were fighting back all day long, every day, all the time. And
Yes.
the first time I heard that actually was from a high school history teacher
Hmm.
who was really like a history buff and went back to like primary sources, and he was
Hmm.
looking through some of the newspapers of that time. He was like, there's this narrative that, all Black people did was like, hunker down and sing Negro spirituals. He's like, but if you look at the primary documents, he's like,
Hmm.
there were slave rebellions all the time, like
Yeah.
all the time. And so again, this place of power, this,
Hmm.
what happens in First Blood is not unique.
Nope.
They were trying to burn it down every day,
Yeah.
while having the will and the faith and the hope to survive if
Yeah.
they couldn't change it,
Yeah.
which is how we got here, which is just
Absolutely.
an incredible legacy that I couldn't
Absolutely.
be prouder to be a part of.
Yeah. 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 So, Blue Honey, and you kind of answered this a little bit as well, but so I think about the dialogue in a story like that. So, where does that dialogue come from? So, I know you mentioned like dreaming the stories, but
Yeah.
do you also draw on like conversations you've had? Like, where does that
Oh,
your
yeah.
dialogue come from?
Well, I have the privilege of living with two young people. My
Hmm.
kids are 13 and 16.
Yeah.
And so trying to be in my son's head or my
Hmm.
daughter's head, if they were going through something like Tut's going through,
Hmm.
he's really just trying to be a kid and has this incredible weight, but he's still a kid.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, having the benefit of that lens around me all the time was definitely helpful. I try to walk because the what I dream is usually just like the kernel of the story, the heart of the
Gotcha.
story.
Yeah.
I don't see all the dialogue and stuff, but what
Okay.
you walk with your characters. Like I
Hmm.
do, normally I do like a chapter outline for each, but since
Hmm.
these are short stories, I don't usually do that. I have a general sort of, here's what happens in this story. That's
Okay.
what I write. It might be a paragraph.
Hmm.
And then once I understand how it starts, what's the middle, how it ends, what's the point of the story, then I'm just really sitting with the characters and I literally hear them talking.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I write down what they say. It's a
Okay.
really crazy process.
Hmm.
But I think living with young people helps me hear that voice,
Hmm.
more clearly, because you do need reference and research. I always say, whenever I'm stuck in a story and I don't know what happens, see, the story is like, I
Hmm.
think Stephen King described it this way. You're sort of like the archaeologist
Yeah.
really trying to excavate the story. And
Hmm.
if you do it well, when you look at it, you know exactly what it is. And if you don't do it well, you're like, is that a dinosaur? And then you know you have work to do.
Yeah.
And so when I don't know what a character says or I don't know how a scene goes, usually I'll be like, okay, let me research their environment some more.
Hmm.
So, and through that process, I find the thing. And then the
Yeah.
character's like, now I can tell you what. Because before, if I tried to tell you, you wouldn't know what it was. You wouldn't
Hmm.
understand, know enough about my world. But
Yeah.
then I do that research on, okay, well, how did they do this? Or what was this environment like? And
Hmm.
then they pour in and say, here, now I'll tell you what I did. And because now you'll understand why.
Awesome.
And I
Awesome.
just write down what they say.
Yeah. You're like the vessel for the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that my characters tell the story.
Yeah.
My job is to write down what they tell me as truly and as well as I can. And then I know I've succeeded when I read it back and I see what I saw in my head. If I read it back and I don't see what I saw in my head, I know I messed up and I get
Okay.
it. But it's never them, it's always me.
Awesome.
They tell
Awesome.
great stories.
Yeah. And my last question related to the book is so the story Human. So of all the stories, that one felt the most cinematic. So like I was like
Oh,
watching, like I was picturing them at the table. I was
mhm.
picturing the
Oh, I
prince.
got an action scene, honey.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love it.
So, do you have a goal of eventually translating some of these books into movies, TV shows, as other type of media that's more visual rather than books?
I would love that opportunity.
Mm,
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. I mean, I love a good sci-fi Western.
Yeah.
So, to be able to do that, I love a good fight scene. I love
Mhm,
action. Um, and so even in my romance, like there's
mhm,
the action going on.
yeah.
So no, I'd love the opportunity to do that. I do think Human would be a really exciting story to tell on film.
Okay. So I'm gonna put that out to the audience, put that out
Yeah,
to the
there you go.
universe. If
That's
you
right.
could
Go do that. Go do that.
produce it,
There's
this I would these stories would be amazing on the screen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Just have a couple more questions. So, you wrote a series of books with your son Arye.
Yes.
So what was your favorite experience from that process? Or you created the stories with him?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, so many. So I'm gonna try to quickly talk through a few. First of all, the fact that he asked me
Oh, okay.
because
Okay.
he was 6 years old and he
Uh-huh.
picked up Order of the Seers, which is
Yeah.
not a children's book, and was like, "Mommy, can I read this?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, can you write me something that I can read?" And I was just like, "Of course, anything you want." And I was
Mhm,
like, "Well, what do you want in your story?" And he told me the elements. Now, at that point, he was 6 and he could read chapter books, but he would not. And
mhm,
when I asked him why, he said there are too many words and no pictures. So
yeah.
immediately I knew I was going to write him a chapter book
Mhm,
that had not just pictures, but pictures in color.
yeah.
Um, it was very action based
Mhm,
because a lot of times with early reader chapter books, they're trying to keep the story simple. The
mhm,
pictures either completely go or they're black and white.
yeah.
And then it's like Jan and her dog went to the store and like, nobody, you got a visual learner who's watching Pokemon
Mhm,
and, Power Rangers. And so he's interested in action-based stories, and the early reader chapter books aren't doing that at all, which is
yeah.
why this is how we lose those visual learners. And
Mhm,
and this is the importance of comics,
yeah.
which I got because I didn't read comics growing up.
Mhm.
I was a book girl. So
Yeah.
anyway, so just the fact that he asked me, and then my other favorite moment was giving the story to him. So I wrote chapter, I wrote a story arc, I gave
Mhm,
it to him because he was my editor, because he's
yeah.
my target audience.
Mhm,
He would read it and go, "Oh, this is cool, mommy, but what about this and this?" And I would
yeah.
change it and give it to him, and he would approve it. Then I'd
Awesome.
give him the chapter outline, and he would approve it,
Mhm,
change things. And it was so wonderful watching. He's actually a really good editor.
mhm,
"Mommy, this is good, but what about this in this place or this in that place?"
mhm,
We come up with story ideas together. The third book in the series, he came up with the entire story.
yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, that was really that's him sneezing. Yeah, that was really like just a wonderful privilege.
Awesome, awesome. You mentioned you being an entrepreneur. I can definitely see that kind of developing entrepreneur like shit within your son as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Both my kids, yeah, are
Mhm.
definitely going to run their own businesses. My
Yeah.
daughter has started several already.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. That's great. And so last couple questions deals with like advice and things that you would like give. So what would be one piece of advice you would give to aspiring writers who see this video?
So the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten is from my friend Trice Hickman, and she said, "Believe in your story."
Yeah.
And it is because believing in your story and your characters will get you through your own self-doubt.
Hmm.
You will fight for them in a way you may not be ready or able to fight for yourself. And when people tell you no, or when people uh, give you not constructive criticism, because constructive criticism is all about making your story better, and
Yeah.
you want all of that.
Hmm.
Not constructive criticism is about how they feel or what they think, which may not have anything to do with the story you're actually trying
Or
to tell.
trying to knock you down to some extent.
Right, trying to knock you down. Oh, well, what makes you think you can do that?
Mhm.
And you have to fighting through all of that is difficult.
Yeah.
It still happens to me,
Hmm.
a lot less than when I started. But
Hmm.
what I like to say is my kung fu is just better now.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
I first started, it was every day was a different feels like a maze and it
Hmm.
shifts because it's you. So it's
Yeah.
really smart. It knows how to get to you.
Yeah.
So one day it would be, who do you think you are trying to
Hmm.
write this story? You've never written a sci-fi story, or you don't have an MFA, or you're
Hmm.
just not good enough. And every day I'd fight through that to write a couple more pages. And then the next day it would be some other manifestation of that.
Hmm.
Um, and so what really drove me through that is a belief in the story.
Yeah.
And that these characters, they've given me so much, and I want to share them with the world. And I
Hmm.
believe they deserve a platform to share the story. And yeah, so that is probably the most important advice
Okay.
that I have gotten, and that's the one that I continue to hold on to.
Okay. 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 Actually, my next question deals with Virtuous Con.
Mhm.
So just for the audience who don't know what it is, what is it and when is going to be the next Virtuous Con event?
Oh, okay. So Virtuous Con is an online
Mhm.
sci-fi and comic culture convention designed to celebrate the excellence of Black and Brown creators
Mhm.
in film, books, comics, um, you know, graphic novels, like
Mhm.
all different mediums.
Yeah.
It's focused on speculative fiction because there are a lot of Black and Brown people doing amazing things
Yeah.
in this industry.
Mhm.
And oftentimes you're not aware of that, but we're doing everything. We're writing the scripts, we're producing the movies, we're
Mhm.
writing the comics, we're doing the books, like all of it. And so
Yeah.
the idea about around Virtuous Con is that you can come and discover these people and
Yeah.
support them. The next event we are still planning. Usually
Okay.
we
Okay.
do a sci-fi convention for Black History Month.
Okay.
We're thinking about how to expand that
Mhm.
so that we can do some in-person events. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
We're still working on it.
Awesome. 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 Um, and well, yeah. So the next question I had was, and I only have like two more left. Is there anything else that you want the audience to know about you or anything you're working on that's coming up? Any kind of projects that's coming up?
Yes, so I have my 12th novel that will be
Yeah.
released in October
Mhm.
called In the Garden of Light and Shadow, The Chronicles of Ada St. James. And
Mhm.
it is a steampunk murder mystery fantasy
Oh, cool.
about a demon slaying nun and a demon who meet, fall in love.
Oh,
They have a child, and that child becomes a soul portal that can save the
okay.
world.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm so excited about it. It is absolutely the most ambitious story I've ever
Mhm.
tried to write. It is a trilogy. I thought it was going to be a duology, and then when I went for
Okay.
a walk, and the character's like, "No, I have more." So this is book one in the trilogy, and it'll be out in October. You can pre-order it on my website. We're going to do a special edition hardcover that yeah, I just found the printer for. So I just could not be more excited. It's
Yeah,
been
I'm
a long.
excited. I'm a huge I'm a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and so that's
Oh,
definitely down my.
yay!
I'm definitely gonna check that book out or get that book.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, but that's what's on tap now. And then yeah, just more stories to come. I've got them all lined up and outlined. Eventually I'll be doing a space opera that
mhm.
is that the human is actually the prequel for, which I did
Oh,
not, which is the first time that's ever happened, where I've written
got
something
you.
that's connected to something else. So
Yeah,
very
and
excited
again,
about that.
so definitely want people to check this book out because this is really it's very cinematic. Like definitely, I was seeing the whole thing in my head as like with the different action scene and everything. So human, I love all the stories, but I definitely saw that story as I
Oh,
read it.
so glad.
And my last question is, if someone wants to learn more about your work or kind of buy your books, like where would you kind of direct them to go?
I would direct them to my website,
Okay.
CereceRennieMurphy.com. It's a great place to start, but you can find my books anywhere. Amazon, Barnes Noble, any place that sells a
Hmm.
book. If they don't have it, they can order it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have samples of, different books there. All of my books, if you are really into character-driven stories with action and adventure, but that's really sort of couched in a character's journey,
Hmm.
I think you'll really enjoy my books. They're not, I don't do hard sci-fi just because well, we'll see with the space opera,
Yeah.
that research.
Well,
But
it definitely felt like, yeah, kind of like just straight up sci-fi.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you I love to keep my story centered on the journey of the
Hmm.
characters because I think that's the entry point. If you don't care about the character, it doesn't matter what the story is.
Hmm.
So I really try to do that. But yeah, and I have so many books to go. So
Awesome.
I'll keep
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. So that's it. Those are my questions. So again, thank you for doing this. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank
And I'll
you.
definitely be reading more of your stuff. So I actually got so I purchased one of your the books you did with your son for my son. I have a
Yeah.
6-year old.
Oh,
So we'll be reading
oh,
that together.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And please let him know that's a little boy wrote that, just his
Yes.
age, so he can do it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, if you found that conversation interesting and or informative, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please share this video. And if you have a favorite author you want me to interview on this channel, please leave those suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.